Hello and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses. My name is Lisa and today we're stitching seam 17 on the CQtober project. I'm so happy with how this is going. We're officially past the halfway point on this. I think I'm going to actually continue stitching as often as I can until I get this project finished. Let's see what our stitch is today. Let me get our bowl of stitches and let's pick one. There we go. Today's stitch is another combination stitch. This is herringbone and Cretan stitch. This is another wonderful combo that I've stitched quite a bit. So let's see where we can put it on our block. I've got the majority of the block visible. Remember that the outer inch or two of this will not be visible in the project. We have a long seam here. We've got this really long one over here. And there's another really long one up here. This is where I wish I knew which stitches were left, and I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to what we've used and what we haven't used yet, so I'm not sure what's still to come. I'm thinking let's do a slightly shorter seam. We just need to pick one and do it, so it's either this one or this one here. Let's just do this one. Well, let me get it on the frame. Let's choose our threads here. So we're going to do herringbone and Cretan. And then of course there's going to be some other type of stitch on top of that. When we did the one with the chevron stitch and the pistol stitch, everything was long lines. And I know I really want to avoid that. So I'm guessing we're going to put lazy daisies in with it. But let's see what we want to do. I'd like to use thread that maybe we haven't used much of. I was thinking about this thread, but I don't want to use it since I just used it right down here. We haven't used a real orangey in this area here for the main part of the seam. I'm just looking, realizing this is another combination stitch right here. We're just going to go with it though. Got that goldy brown. Boy, that is almost identical to what is right there. So we don't want to use that. We do have this darker orange. I like that one. So I think it looks okay on that orange. I just want to make sure it's looking good on everything here. I think it's just enough lighter than this. It goes okay on here. It looks great on the brown and this dark pattern, and it looks okay on here. So that's one. And then we need a contrast with that. I do have a Cretan stitch right here, so I want to try and stay away from what I did there. So I don't want the green for that right there. I also have this lighter orange, which is really nice. Is it enough contrast though? And we just use burgundy here, so I don't necessarily want to use that. Got that lighter gold. That's the one we did this with, I think. And we just used this beige right here. And so I don't really want to use it again there. So this is where using a more limited palette is making it a little harder. The other lighter orange one I have is this one that does have some red in it. I think this is a better contrast though. Let's go for contrast. So we have these two so far. So those are good contrasts. And then we need to think about probably lazy daisies and or French knots with this one. We don't have anything down here with green on it, so I'm thinking we do need to pull some green through, but I don't want to use it for one of the main stitches. And we've got this one that's got some brown in it, and I think that might do really nice. And that'll show up against some of those dark ones as well. So I think we have our three colors. All right, let me get my needles threaded and we'll get going. I've been thinking about this stitch and I realized that this is a narrow piece. By the time we get a seam down here and one down here, there's not much of the fabric showing. This is really narrow here and our colors are going to sort of disappear on that. So I think what I'm going to do is we're going to stitch primarily on this dark side of the seam. So this is going to be one that's offset just a little bit. So we have our dark one and I'm thinking, do I want to put that at the back? What about doing that one at the back? Let's do that. I am going to come over the seam ever so slightly because I have the herringbone and then the Cretan. And I'm thinking we're going to do the herringbone a little bit bigger. And then we're going to do the Cretan stitch on top of it, but smaller. So I want to think about how big I want this to go. So I'm going to just sort of lay it out here and see what I think. So that just gives me a feel, and then the Cretan will come inside of that. I think that actually might be pretty decent. So I think we'll come up here. Just realizing this needle seems a little small. Yeah, let me change that needle. Sorry, folks. When you're having a hard time getting through the fabric, that's one of your cues that the needle is a little small. You want the needle to open the fabric up to allow the thread through. That's one of the main purposes of the needle. Not only to draw the thread through, but to open the fabric. So when I have a hard time getting through the fabric, that's my key that I probably need a slightly bigger needle. Again, as we've talked about in almost all these stitches that involve these parallel lines, making sure they stay parallel. Now this one, because it's a bigger, more open stitch, I am going over some of this in the seam here, and I'm not going to worry about it too much. Felt like I got that last one there a little bit low, and that might have just been because I pulled it a little too tight and it buried in the pile of the fabric. And I feel like we're sinking down. I need to come back and redo that. I don't like doing that, having to pull it out, because then that's a little more wear and tear on the thread as well. Let's try this again. So really watching where I'm coming, staying out here. And again, it may just be because I've lost it up here in the pile of the fabric, especially right here where we're in that seam. Bring it down. And this fabric is also curving a little bit, so we want it curved. So like we've done before, I'm going to open it up ever so slightly. And I don't think there should be a whole lot of difference up here. I think that's looking better. I think I have pulled out more stitches working in front of the camera because I'm so busy talking. I don't pay quite as much attention to what I'm doing, and so it sometimes leads to errors. Oh, and see, that didn't quite. We're going to let that one go. We're going to let it go. Now, the color variation on this also is impacting, and this one is a little wider. We've gotten a little bit narrower as we've gone. I think by the time we're all said and done, it's not going to be terribly noticeable. And I don't feel like tearing it out again, so we're going to make it work. But it's easy to forget on this velveteen that you have to be generous in your stitches or they're going to get hidden in that fabric. Okay, we're pretty close up here, and there's a cat hair. There's a couple in there. I think that's going to be the last one. I'm actually right at the edge of the frame there. So now we have that one. I do wonder if we need to put in another one. I think that actually will help it look more in scale with the rest of things. I just sort of missed that I needed to put in this one here. So let's do that real quick. So that helps. That's better. I'm happier with that. So we've parked that out of the way. Now we're going to come back with this orange, and we're going to stitch our Cretan stitch on top of that. I had problems with this brown velvet. I didn't cut my pieces generously enough, and I've noticed that they're shrinking as I stitch. So this one, we're going to do a Cretan stitch. Now, I told you a couple videos ago that I learned a different method of doing Cretan stitch, and so we're going to do that. I've got to stop and think a minute. So I want to bring that Cretan to the top of my herringbones here, and then if you pull it down, did you see how that just tucked right down there? And now we're going to do the same thing here. So this is going to be a really shallow Cretan stitch. It's going to look related, but it's going to look so different than this one. So again, we're going to be stitching directly up. So my thread is up above, and then when I pull it down, it just pulls right into place. So I'm coming just over the edge of that fabric. And then we're coming out in line with the cross on the top of the herringbone. And I'm going down, coming up in line with the cross there. Why this is not the normal way to do this stitch, I have no idea. But I think we should be changing the books on it. I think it just makes a big difference. And especially if I was stitching in hand or with less bulky fabrics, I would want to use this stitch. Just magic. So this one is a thank you to Jennifer Clouston, who showed how to do this on one of her daily snippets of my stitching life. I'm such an admirer of her. I've loved her books for a long time. Wonderful stitcher. And I love how she shares information. So definitely check out her site. I'll put a link in the description box if you need. So as I'm finishing up this seam, I want you to be looking at it and thinking, what would you do next on it? What would be your go-to for additional stitches on it? There's so many possibilities. I'm still leaning toward lazy daisies, but I don't want to do something that looks like this. We have to think about how we're going to change it up to make it unique to this seam. And I got a little lower over here, I can tell, so just to keep these, we're going to maybe fudge those just slightly higher. And I pulled that awfully tight, you can't hardly see that. I did that back here too. So in this one, we're always keeping the thread over the needle. Pull too tight. I think we're at the last one here for this. Almost can't stitch that. And I don't think I'm even going to put the top on it because I think we're just too close. I think it's going to be hard to knot as it is. So there's that. So herringbone and Cretan stitch. And the Cretan doesn't look anything like that, which is what I was going for. Okay, let's turn this over. We'll have to readjust that here. Let me just make my knot here because I'm coming completely undone and then I'll be back. Okay, so when I'm that close, I just have to bring it out and make my knot out here. All right, we're going to make this knot over here. We might need to make 2 passes on this. So I think what I want to start with is coming up at the end of our little Cretan stitch. My thread all bunched together there. And I want to make 1 lazy daisy. But instead of doing just our little stitch down, I'm going to make a French knot. It's a knotted lazy daisy. So it's a variation. It's a kind of a combo of the two. And I think that's going to make it just enough more interesting. We may not need anything else. This thread is very twisty. It's 1, 2, 3 wraps and down. There we go. Well, we've had beautiful fall leaves and colors this week, and I just love it in the early morning when the sun comes through the trees and they're just glowing with orange. I'll pop up a picture for you to see here. But then we had a couple of days of wind and much cooler temperatures, and the leaves are nearly completely off the trees now. Oh, I pulled that too tight. I want that lazy daisy to be just a smidgen looser here. Now, I'm not going to do one down here because we're competing in there. Trying to find the bottom of that Cretan stitch there. So again, don't pull too tight. That one's a little small. It'll work. This is a brown section of the thread here. So this thread is working out well on this because it's using up the thread quickly enough that you can really see the variegation of it. And it really shines nice, especially when you get to those brighter green sections against this dark fabric. But I also feel like it's showing up pretty well on this one here when it gets to the brighter green. Let's see if I have enough thread to finish the seam with this. I'm thinking I probably won't. I'm going to be close. I think this is going to be the last one, and then we need a new thread. We're going to have to tighten that in there somehow. Let's finish this seam. I was just going to make a regular lazy daisy. I think with this seam, since we have 2 passes with the herringbone, the Cretan stitch, and now the knotted lazy daisies, that we're going to call it done. Again, just to keep it in balance with the others. If I was going to do more on it, I would probably take this green or maybe even a gold and do little straight stitches off the tops of the herringbone. Let me get this turned over, make my knot, and then we will get it off of the frame and take a look at it. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think this is the best seam I've stitched. It's a little uneven, and I wish I had caught that earlier. I'm going to make a second knot and catch in that other long thread here. I just don't want that being loose. If it's too loose, then it allows the stitch to pull loose on the front. Now it's all tight and not too much of an issue, hopefully. So there we have our stitch. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think it balances well with everything that's around it. It doesn't look like anything that's around it, even though it's got similar stitches, because we had herringbone and Cretan right next door, and so this sort of brings them together. It's got lazy daisies, but with the little French knot on them, they don't look like the ones around it. And I think the color balances, so that's working well. I had a couple comments about why I'm using the frame, and partly it's because with the hoop, I felt like it was damaging the fabric. You can actually see where it sort of pressed a curve mark into the fabric there, and that won't come out. The other thing I'm finding is that it's a little hard on some of these stitches, so when they get rubbed against the frame, and it's the outside frame that's the issue, it's hard on those threads, so I need to actually come in and repair that. And I actually had another one, and I don't even remember where it was now. I think it was on this seam that I had to go back and tighten up because it had really pulled everything loose. That's the reason for using the frame over the hoop. I probably need a slightly bigger frame. My bigger ones are all in use with other projects at the moment. We'll just keep making do with that one. I know if I'm working in hand, I prefer a smaller hoop, maybe 6 inches is about the maximum that I like. But when I'm working on the frame, I like a little more room for my hands. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop there and say thank you so much for being here watching today. I deeply appreciate it. I hope you have a beautiful day and some happy stitching along the way. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.